So I will be sending out the recording after the webinar is over, and I'll also send out the presentations as well. So don't feel like you have to scribble everything down. We'll send out the presentations. So let's go ahead and get started. So again, my name is Danielle Coco. I'm the Marketing Director at SUSTA. I'm going to give a brief rundown of SUSTA and who we are and the programs that we offer to help small businesses export. And then we'll hear from Pamela Wells-Russell, who is our in-country consultant in the Caribbean. She is going to give an in-depth presentation on the Caribbean market, and we'll talk a little bit about a trade mission that we have coming up with buyers from the Caribbean and Central America. So this is SUSTA's region in the blue. We cover all of the South from Virginia, West Virginia on down and all the way west to Texas. We are federally funded through the USDA's Foreign Agriculture Service, but we work really closely with the Departments of Agriculture in all of our southern states. So if you've ever been on an event with us, you've probably met an activity manager from one of the southern states. So we operate as a regional trade organization. You know, if you're located in Texas and you're going to China with SUSTA, you might be with an activity manager who's from the Maryland Department of Agriculture. So, you know, we operate as a southern regional trade association helping small businesses who are headquartered in the South. So these are our eligibility requirements. Again, you have to be headquartered in our region. You must be small by SBA standards, have adequate resources and product supply. You know, we help companies who are promoting their products in foreign markets, and we just want to make sure that the companies who are partaking in our programs are ready to really pursue exports, because the exporting takes time, money, energy, and we want to make sure companies are really export ready before they tackle SUSTA and you know, trying to meet foreign buyers. And with that, we also like to see an annual sales minimum of about $50,000. And then in terms of product requirements, the products have to have a brand name on them. We're not promoting, you know, Georgia peanuts. We're there to promote a certain brand of peanuts. Or, you know, it's not just that, you know, we're one of those cooperators who's promoting wheat. We'd be promoting a specific, you know, a brand name. So your product has to have a brand name on it. It must also be made of at least 50% U.S. agriculture content. So we determine that by weight, and that's excluding any water weight or packaging weight. We just look at the core ingredients, and at least 50% must be farmed, fished, or forested here in the U.S. And last but not least, there must be a U.S. origin statement on the product saying any of these things, product of USA, America, or the name of the state spelled out, grown in USA, America, or the name of the state, or made in. The programs that we offer are, again, funded primarily through the USDA, and they really want to see that the companies using these programs are promoting their products as U.S. products out in the world. So just a few things to keep in mind as we move forward. Our two market access programs are global events and 50% cost share. Global events, we organize roughly 40 events throughout the year all over the world and invite companies to participate, and companies meet foreign buyers on those events. And then through 50% cost share, we can reimburse companies half of certain international marketing expenses. So these are the three types of global events that we organize. We have inbound trade missions where we bring foreign buyers here to the U.S. To meet with our companies. Those are usually pretty low cost, and it's an opportunity to meet with foreign buyers without leaving the U.S. So a great first step to exporting if you're new to all this. And even if you're not new, it's just a really good low barrier way to meet foreign buyers. Outbound trade missions function similarly in that you're going to meet one-on-one with foreign buyers, but you, the U.S. company, would be traveling to the foreign market to do so. So in addition to meeting one-on-one with the buyers, you also get a retail tour, You'd go, visit groceries and convenience stores where your products may wind up. It's a great way to see competition and the other trends taking place in the market. And then international trade shows. SUSTA organizes pavilions at trade shows all over the world, and we rent out anywhere from 5 to 20 booth spaces depending on the show, and we manage it from start to finish. So the benefit of coming with us is that you get the benefit of us managing this pavilion and making sure that everything from you meeting your deadlines to getting your product into the market and at the show is all really the responsibility of SUSTA and our activity managers. In addition to that, we typically reduce the cost of the trade show booths significantly. So if you exhibit in our pavilion, you'll get your own booth space, but instead of, let's say, $6,000 or $7,000 for a booth space, if you come with us, it might only be about $1,200. So I did want to mention one thing before I move on to 50% cost share about our inbound trade missions. I highlighted the Caribbean and Central America mission to Florida coming up in June. That is where Pamela Wells Russell is helping us organize that trade mission, and we'll talk about it later on. But that's a great way to meet buyers from the Caribbean and Central America at that trade mission. So all of our events are posted online at susta.org. You just click on the Events tab. There's no membership fee for our Global Events program. Once you've been reviewed by the Global Events Director and she's looked at your eligibility and said that you're eligible, you can just sign up and pay on a per event basis. The 50% cost share program is a little bit more in-depth because we do reimburse companies half of certain international marketing expenses. So I'll run through that, and these are all of the eligible expenses that we can reimburse 50% of. So advertising in a foreign market, if you wanted to develop web pages on your existing website in a different language, or if you wanted to create a foreign URL to target foreign buyers, those expenses are 50% reimbursable. If you have to modify your packaging or labels to meet the import requirements of a foreign government, we can reimburse half of those costs. In-store displays that call attention to your product are 50% reimbursable. Keep in mind, though, that's in the foreign market, not here in the U.S. In-store demonstrations and food service promotions. So if you go to Costco or Whole Foods and you see people handing out samples of products, we can reimburse half of the expenses of doing that in foreign markets. Exhibiting at international trade shows and approved U.S. trade shows, we can reimburse half of the cost of your booth space and related expenses when you're exhibiting at international trade shows. If you're coming with SUSTA and exhibiting in our pavilion at a trade show and we've already reduced the cost, then you can't come in for the 50% reimbursement. But let's say you're going on your own to a trade show, that is something we could reimburse 50% of, or your booth fees. And then there's a list of trade shows that take place in the U.S. that the USDA considers international. Those are the big ones like Fancy Food and Natural Products, the National Restaurant Association, and we can reimburse half of the booth fees for those shows. Travel expenses, we can reimburse half of the flight, hotel, and a per diem for up to 2 company employees or representatives when you're exhibiting at a trade show outside of the U.S. or participating in a pre-approved outbound trade mission. So we can never reimburse travel here in the U.S. Trade seminars sponsored by a company, that would be to teach the foreign market about your product. Part-time contractors, if you were to hire somebody to help work your booth, or maybe a translator, those are all things that we can reimburse half of their hourly wages. Freight for shipping samples and marketing materials to a trade event. Promotional giveaway items, if you have ice cream, let's say, and you wanted to hand out ice cream scoops with your company brand and logo on it, we can reimburse up to $2 per item for those promotional giveaway items. Printed sales material, direct mailing to foreign buyers, and public relations and press kits. If you wanted to inform the foreign media, let's say, that you're going to be exhibiting this awesome new product at Gulf Food in Dubai, you could do that and get reimbursed 50%. So that is the full list of the expenses that we can reimburse half of. I know that was a very quick run through of that, so I'm happy to go through this with anybody after the webinar or sometime next week. The way it works is you have to fill out a full application for the 50% cost share funds in advance. So before you go out and spend the money and do the promotions, you need to let us know how much you want to get reimbursed for and in what foreign markets and for what types of expenses. So you let us know all of that in the application. You pay a 6% administrative fee on the amount that you want to get reimbursed in the year. And then you go out and you do the trade promotions that you want to do. You collect the required documents, and then you submit the documents to us. So it's a reimbursement program. It's not a grant program. And yes, so that is 50% cost share in a nutshell. The way to get started, I think you all have a MySESTA account. So when you create your account, you check off which program you're interested in, 50% cost share, global events, or education, and then you're reviewed accordingly. So if you did not check off 50% cost share, but you are interested in that program, then you can go back into your account and check that off, and we'll have that program area review you. Same thing with global events. And then every year you have to recertify your account details so that we make sure that you're still eligible for the programs, and that is how we work. We operate on the calendar year. So just keep that in mind. Come August 1st, you'll see the notification to recertify your account details, because we open up the application process for next year, August 1st of this year. So I hope that's not confusing. Anyway, now we will hear from Pamela Wells-Russell, SESTA's in-country consultant for the Caribbean market. Pamela has represented SESTA and other U.S. trade organizations in the Caribbean for over 15 years. She spent more than 30 years in export marketing in an advisory capacity, assisting small and medium-sized enterprises to expand their businesses globally. So I'm going to give Pamela the privileges to share her screen. All right. Great, Pamela. It's coming up.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Danielle. Can you see the screen that says Retail and Food Service Opportunities?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you, and again, welcome. As Danielle says, I've been working in the Caribbean for a while, and it certainly is my pleasure to talk to you a little bit about the opportunities that lie within the region, specifically for food and beverage and value-added agricultural products, but definitely more focused on food and beverages, as that's the big category of focus and of import. So just to go over some of the good reasons why you would want to consider the Caribbean, apart from the obvious, which is that we are literally in your neighborhood, just down the road, as we say in the Caribbean, we're down the road. The proximity of the region makes it that much easier to access our markets. What you'll find, particularly out of the South Florida region, Miami or South Florida is considered the gateway to our region. So in terms of back and forth transportation and shipping happens very frequently and regularly, and it almost runs like clockwork. Not to mention the familiarity that Caribbean people have with the United States, whether it is Caribbean people living here, and believe me, we're all over the place in the United States, or whether it is that we are familiar with a lot of U.S. citizens coming to visit us in our countries, because as you know, tourism is a major industry for most of the countries in the Caribbean market. Certainly that has a lot of influence. Not to mention that we have a high propensity for importing and consuming products from the United States. We get a lot of exposure because in the Caribbean, we have satellite TV or cable TV that comes right from the United States. So all the advertising and whatever is happening in your market, we hear about it because we are watching TV and see what's going on. And, you know, of course, other influences, other ways that the media communicates with us online, etc. So there is certainly great awareness, certainly a great appreciation for products of the United States, and you certainly are our major trading partner in the Caribbean. Not to mention the fact that in the Caribbean, whereas you know, there may be some of the bigger countries, for example, the Dominican Republic, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, some of the other islands, where there is some level of agriculture and agro-industry activity, we are, by and large, even in those countries, highly import dependent for consuming, you know, food and beverage products and products generally. So what you'll find is that we're pretty open markets because we need to eat and we need to consume and use products. So we are pretty open markets when it comes to bringing in products into our markets for us to utilize and consume. So relatively speaking, compared to other territories, you may find that we are pretty easy to access in the Caribbean in terms of market entry requirements, et cetera, et cetera. Not to say that we're totally free access, because there's no such thing as totally free, but by and large, much easier to access than many places all over the world. And of course, as in all cases, you know, I always like to point out that, you know, there are lots of islands or lots of countries that make up the Caribbean market, and each market has their peculiarity, but by and large, you know, as a region, we're a good block and a good opportunity to try and target. And the last thing I'd say before I move on to my presentation, because I can get a little carried away and chat all day, is that bear in mind the fact that we are pretty accessible as a market. Obviously, the competition is there. I mean, it's highly competitive as a market also. Having said that, too, is that what you'll find is in most of the markets, the majority of the market share, the largest market share does go to U.S. products and U.S. companies. So with that in mind, let's have a look at what the United States has been doing in terms of exports of agricultural and related products to the Caribbean market. You can see in the graph that is on the left-hand side, basically a trend of U.S. exports of agricultural and related products over the last 10 years. By and large, the U.S. has been exporting about $4 billion, somewhere between 3.5 to 4 billion of exports every year since 2008 to up to last year. What you'll notice that there have been one or two significant drops over that period in 2009, for example, and 2015, but certainly there has been recoveries, and the exports have been growing fairly consistently beyond that, and in more recent times have been growing over 2016, 2017. The other thing I'd like to point out about that graph is bear in mind that includes all agricultural products. So where there was declines in those years, 2009 and 2015, it was specifically in the categories of bulk, exports, and intermediates. The good news for you, food and beverage manufacturers and exporters, is that the category that the USDA calls consumer-oriented, which is basically consumer-oriented food and value-added agricultural products and ag-related products, those categories have been growing. There has not been a decline. And in fact, in 2017, there was actual growth in that category. Hello?
Nope. Yes, we hear you.
Okay, it's just that my screen has gone blank, so pardon me. Sorry about that.
Okay,
yes,
sure. We're still seeing.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
So back to the point, yes. So if you look at the 2017 pie chart on the right-hand side, you'll see that, as I was saying before, well, consumer-oriented food products and consumer-oriented agricultural products and ag-related products, those have been consistently growing. And in fact, in 2017, consumer-oriented products reached what they call record levels of exports. So that's the good news. Although there have been declines in agricultural exports over the last 10 years, it's really in the area, the categories that we're not too concerned about for today's webinar with bulk and intermediate. Now, just looking at the pie chart, you can also see with the Caribbean how important or what a significant share consumer-oriented products and ag-related products represent to the Caribbean, representing over just about 60% of overall shares of U.S. Agricultural exports. So that sort of underscores the point that I'm making, that there's great opportunity and already great consumption from the United States in the Caribbean of food and beverage and related products. So for example, seafood falls in the category of ag-related products, which is the share of 12%, you know. Let's look a little more specifically at some of the major U.S. food exports to the Caribbean. The top 5 product categories are poultry, which you can see is quite significant, by far, nearly $500 million in exports. These are the statistics that we're looking at for 2017. Beef and pork, which is the next big category. Dairy. So some of the, the key categories are certainly meats, poultry, dairy, and then also snack foods, wine, and beer. Now, having said that, this is just highlighting the top 5. As I said before, these markets in the Caribbean are highly import dependent on what they consume, and basically it's a breadth of food categories or food and beverage categories that there are opportunities for. Some of the trends you probably want to look at are basically what's happening right here in the United States. What you'll find, let me take snacks as an example. Importers or the consumers in the Caribbean are looking for more healthier products, because that ties into the overall global or trend that we see worldwide, where the consumers are becoming more health conscious, or they have more specific needs in terms of dietary requirements. So what you're finding now is that the buyers of snack foods and stuff are looking. They read all the well-known multinational brands in their market. Now they're looking for little opportunities for more healthier products, or products that meet or speak to a specific dietary need or requirement. And even specialty is also another area where they're acquiring different tastes for different types of foods. And certainly all of those influences that you see right here in the United States, as I said before, we basically reflect what goes on in this market. We're a little slow sometimes to catch up with the trends, but we definitely follow the trends in the U.S. and international markets by and large. Some other factors we also have to consider also the whole convenience. So you see there on the slide we have highlighted the frozen food section. Well, that's because convenience is another trend that you'll find that, as more and more consumers in their home are getting busy and don't have time to prepare meals, you find ready to eat or easy to prepare. Those type of products are doing quite well in the Caribbean, and the demand is increasing. So you find that the retailers are reflecting this demand by expanding their sections to house products that quick prepare and frozen or ready to eat. So that gives you an idea of the type of trends. Now, looking at these statistics, again from the USDA FAS, these are basically what they call record U.S. exports, food and beverage exports at record export levels. These product categories last year all indicated what they call levels, the highest levels ever of exports that they have on record at the USDA FAS in terms of export statistics. So again, the big category of poultry products, pork products, wine and beer, fish products, fresh vegetables, chocolate and cocoa products, and other meat products. So that is interesting in terms of looking at some of the growth categories that are of U.S. exports to the Caribbean market. Now, before I move on, I could not have this presentation without making some mention about the cruise industry. I mean, typically when I'm talking to people about the Caribbean market, they always ask me, what are the opportunities in the cruise ship industry? And honestly, they're huge. In our programs here with Sustock, we don't directly sell to the cruise industry because that's a whole industry by itself. But it's good to know, and certainly there are opportunities out there to sell to the market. And I just wanted to point out a couple of statistics that I got from a source called Statistica, and this is for 2017 statistics, where they spoke about the overall revenue of the cruise industry. And you can see from that graph on the left that Actual data is up to 2015, where over $33.2 billion in revenue for the cruise industry, and therefore they were estimating, which is pretty accurate for 2016, about $35 billion, and over the next, for 2017 and the next 10 years to 2027, they were looking at it growing up to $57 billion. So you can tell that the cruise industry worldwide is huge, pretty huge, and it's growing and expected to grow quite significantly. I always like to highlight the fact that, because like I said before, South Florida, or the Florida region, is the gateway to the Caribbean, that the three top cruise ship industries in the world are headquartered in Miami or in Miami stroke South Florida region, and that is Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean Cruises, and Norwegian Cruise Line. So that's very interesting and very important when you consider the importance of this industry, the Caribbean. Now, as you can see, there's some two good pluses for you folks who are United States companies. First of all, the good news is that of the over 20 million cruise ship passengers that they have every year, over 50% of them are from the United States. So that's a good indicator. So certainly they have a taste and a preference for U.S. products. So that's a good thing. The second thing I wanted to share, so that's in terms of the source or the origin of the cruise ship passengers. In terms of the primary destination, as you can see from the diagram on the right-hand side, the Caribbean is the lead destination. It represents 35% share of cruise capacity. And this was a statistic in 2016, but presumably it's similar for up to 2017, 2018, and followed by the Mediterranean, et cetera, et cetera. So that is also interesting statistics that I think, bear some reason and certainly open up possible opportunities for companies looking to sell to this industry. Now, I found it very interesting. Remember, we highlighted that Carnival by far is the largest cruise ship industry in the world. In a magazine, the Cruise Industry News Quarterly magazine, the 2017 summer edition, they had an interview with one of their corporate the procurement person, director. And, out of that article or that discussion, I picked up some of this very interesting information. And basically it was saying that Carnival Corporation spends over $1 billion on food products annually, which is pretty major. And they were explaining in the article how they approach or how they approach going about sourcing these food and beverage products to supply to their cruise ships. And what was pointed out that about 35 to 40% of what they sourced in terms of food and beverage was done globally. And bear in mind that global sourcing or procurement happens in their headquarters in Miami. And then about another 35% was sourced regionally because they have regional operations and what they call cruise brands or cruise companies all over the world. So wherever they were situated, they would do regional sourcing, and then the balance was done locally. And I'm pretty aware that certainly in the Caribbean, there is some level of cruise ships sourcing directly from what they call ship chandlers, which are like a lot of local importer distributors who do ship chandling. So they will also supplement the needs of the cruise ship industries and supply them with product when they get to the port of call, wherever it is in the Caribbean. These companies supply them to top up their stock and their needs in terms of food and beverages and other products. So that was interesting. What was also interesting that I saw from that Carnival interview was the fact that Carnival says that of the 33,000 suppliers globally, they spend less than $100,000 with about 28,000 suppliers. So what that ding, 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 ding lit up to me was, wow, there's opportunity for quote-unquote small companies because they have so many suppliers and they're not just dealing with major suppliers because of the size of the orders that we're talking about annually. It's about like $100,000 in business, which is good business for small companies, but the point is that they're willing to to purchase from smaller suppliers. And then finally, the point which is kind of obvious, but it's good to highlight, they always said that what they're looking for in suppliers, Carnival Cruise Line, is that quality, service, innovation, competitive advantage. And, those are mantras that we're all aware of in terms of trying to be competitive and meet the requirements of our customers. So that was, I found, very interesting information. Now, in terms of entry strategies to the Caribbean, I always recommend, because as I said before, the Caribbean collectively is a great market opportunity, but it's a lot of little markets that make up the regional market opportunity. And so what I like to do is focus in on what I call the top 10 export markets in the Caribbean. And basically, that grouping there you see in the graph on the right, those 10 markets basically consume over 80% of U.S. exports of consumer-oriented foods to the Caribbean every year. And by far, you can see the biggest market opportunity, probably in terms of volumes and everything, and by far in terms of even just population size, is the Dominican Republic. The only other island that is not reflected there, that's Cuba, because of the fact that, you know, we don't really have free trade access to them and a free trade agreement, excuse me. But by and large, the DR is by far the largest market opportunity, followed by the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, the Netherlands Antilles, which comprises Curacao, Bonaire, and St. Martin, Haiti, Bermuda. Now, let me just pause at Bermuda, because technically, Bermudans like to remind us we're not in the Caribbean, but we embrace them as part of our region, because really Bermuda is situated, don't follow that map, but they're situated in the Atlantic, just east of the Carolinas. So, but their culture, their history, their everything is just like the rest of us in the Caribbean. So we embrace them as part of our Caribbean market, and they are a good market opportunity. And then there's Aruba, Cayman, and Barbados. In terms of market entry strategies, there are basically two ways to approach the market, either directly or indirectly. And if a U.S. exporter is going directly to the market, you can sell directly to a local importer wholesaler or directly to a local retailer or HRI customer, which would be maybe some large hotel group or whatever that's in the market. Now, what you'll find in the Caribbean, by nature of the size of our markets, there are very little levels. So you basically are either selling directly to an importer distributor who would then in turn sell to the local customers, or directly to some of the big customers, or both. The other approach, which is the indirect approach, and again, this is all part of the strategy that your company may come up with, is through what we call U.S. wholesalers or consolidators, who are typically based, well, anywhere along the East Coast for the Caribbean, but primarily in southern Florida, sometimes up in New York, depends, you know, on where you're selling to. So, or, you know, when I say in the Northeast region. So basically, that would be the approach that you get, and it's very straightforward and quite simple in terms of targeting the region. Now, when talking to, and I mean, every company is different, every company has, a slightly different approach or different needs, but generally speaking, if you're thinking about entering the Caribbean or trying to expand, if you're already there and trying to expand, I usually recommend that companies sit down and ask themselves some key questions about what exactly are your export objectives and strategy, what kind of resources do you have, how much, what is their level of experience dealing with exporting generally and maybe even to the Caribbean. And, based on how you answer your questions, you can then define, what sort of approach you want to take in trying to sell to the Caribbean market. One approach is some companies have a vision to, be selling worldwide or maybe region-wide, whatever it is. If you want regional coverage, what I can recommend, or not necessarily, I certainly don't think any company, and I certainly even know working with larger companies selling to the Caribbean, that you could do direct exports to every single Caribbean market, because some of them are just too small. But certainly sell directly to the larger markets, and then indirectly, like I spoke about, through a consolidator wholesaler type of operation to smaller markets. Another approach is if you just, have limited resources. Everybody has limited resources, but some more than others, and you have minimal experience, then you may want to try the indirect approach to the region first and sell through a company based out of Florida or Puerto Rico or somewhere like that, and then target, then sell to the region indirectly that way. And what you find sometimes when companies do that is, if the products do well, if you find that the sales are doing well, specifically to certain markets, they then may want to investigate further and try and do direct business with some of those markets and stop selling indirectly to some, some the markets that are doing well in the Caribbean. So that's another approach. And then finally, some companies just want to take a little, put a toe in the water and see how it does, and they target very specific markets, especially to start with, and what you find also is that I've heard companies tell me that, I just started exporting to the Caribbean by chance. I was at a trade show. I met a buyer from XYZ country, and the rest is history. So you'll be surprised that sometimes things happen in the most unplanned and unexpected ways, and sometimes those are the biggest blessings. But and in that case, like I said, you may just target a specific market here or there. So those are just some suggestions on how you could go about approaching the market. Now, for sure, anybody you speak to who's doing business or who's trading in the Caribbean, bringing in product from anywhere in the world, but more specifically, we're talking about the United States, consolidation is key for the Caribbean. You find that most imported distributors, retailers, hotel groups, whoever, they work with consolidators. Some of them actually have, we have big groups of companies, trading companies or hotel groups that have their own operations based out of typically South Florida or something like that. But most of the companies themselves have specific companies that they work with, who they get their suppliers, wherever they are located in the United States, to ship down their product to Florida, and then they consolidate and ship it down to them. And basically it's because of the nature of our markets. We're relatively small markets that need products on a regular and ongoing basis, and what they find is that they prefer to receive consolidated shipments frequently rather than getting container loads of products that they have to store and warehouse, and they don't have capacity and based on the variety that they need and that type of thing. So consolidation provides that solution in terms of logistics and in terms of the needs of their markets that they offer. So the role of U.S. export wholesalers and consolidators is very critical to the region. In fact, a majority of the freight moving to the region is consolidated out of Florida, as I have indicated. Just to point out, though, that as I said before, Bermuda, which is just off the coast of the Carolinas, not just, but east of the Carolinas in the Atlantic, they do a lot of their sourcing through consolidators, et cetera, through New Jersey, and to a lesser extent in northern Florida out of Jacksonville. Certainly, consolidators have various success factors to consider: the proximity to the market, because of their location. We have like I said, the majority of the consolidators are based in Miami, which is the hub, or South Florida, and then there's some sub-hubs like out of Puerto Rico, to a less extent, especially to the smaller islands closer to Puerto Rico, and then like I indicated, out of the Northeast. The other factors that the consolidators offer is a wide range of products and services, and because of the volume of trade that they're doing, they're able to offer competitive prices for the products that are coming out of the States to their customers in the Caribbean. Of course, and I'm using the term very broadly for consolidators, because there are some consolidators that carry products and do all the logistical freight forwarding work, and some that act only as freight forwarders. So we need to clarify that, when I use that term, it's very, very general, but we're talking about all aspects of the services that are available through a company that, provides consolidation, freight forwarding, purchase of products. In a lot of instances, you will find that the Caribbean importers, the buyers, they have specialized consolidators. Like they'll have, well, this is my frozen food consolidator, and this is my dry goods, and then some of the larger consolidators are able to offer all services for all types of products. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that one of the biggest concerns that you find, especially amongst importer distributors who have like exclusivity for company, specific lines and specific brands or specific companies' products, one of their biggest complaints or biggest issues is the fact that parallel trading impacts their business a lot, negatively. And that basically is when a U.S. company, sometimes they don't even know, because I've seen cases where U.S. companies are selling products, specifically in the South Florida region, and somehow their product is purchased and sold through a wholesaler consolidator out of Miami or South Florida, and it gets to a market in the Caribbean, into a supermarket or something there, and that's how the product got to the market. and usually, typically, the U.S. exporter doesn't even know this is happening. But what it does is that if that company has a local exclusive imported distributor, it impacts their business because, maybe it's a major retailer that has gotten this product through a consolidator, so they lose that business. And it also is competing with them when they should have the rightful place of being that exclusive distributor. So that is an issue and a common complaint that you'll find in the region. And usually, if it arises, it's something that they need to raise with their supplier in the United States and see if they can combat that problem of parallel trading by, looking at pricing or whatever to see how they can discourage that problem of the product coming in through another source and competing with them directly. So just needed to raise that. But by and large, consolidation is a must and part of the whole practice of doing business with the Caribbean. Certainly, from your perspective, particularly if that is the route that you look at going through, there are certain advantages as you, as a U.S. exporter, U.S. company trying to sell to the Caribbean. First of all, you get wide access to a large number of buyers in the Caribbean through a single customer. That's certainly the biggest and obvious opportunity and advantage of selling to consolidator. You also may provide you with an opportunity of expanding your distribution. I mean, whereas, if you're alone as a company, you may only be able to deal with 1 or 2 markets in the Caribbean, but through the consolidator, you may get to go across the region in terms of your distribution. There is, should be, no guarantees because nobody can vouch for every company, but certainly the payment risk, there should be a lower risk of, getting paid for your products working with a U.S.-based company that is a consolidator versus potentially a buyer in the Caribbean, a much smaller size buyer. What you may find in the Caribbean, in some cases, especially with the smaller companies, they may ask for more credit terms and, like 30-day credit or 60-day, depending on the situation. But certainly, that may not be an issue if you're dealing with a consolidator out of the United States. The consolidators certainly have more in-depth knowledge and, more suited capabilities for the region than perhaps your firm may have, especially if you're exporting to markets all over the world, and so they provide that knowledge. And in some cases, depending on how large a company it is, some of the consolidators have their own private label brands, and so that is another opportunity that could be offered to you as a U.S. supplier to try and sell to the Caribbean by giving, producing products for them under their private label. So, that's just another advantage of dealing possibly with a consolidator out of the United States. So let's look at the imported distributors, who I consider, for most U.S. companies trying to sell to the Caribbean, probably the type of customer most of you will be dealing with, because I think probably the best approach to the region is to find solid partners, import distribution partners, who you can work with in specific markets, specifically the bigger markets that you may want to sell to in the Caribbean. I like to share basically what they tell me, because as you know from my, as Danielle had indicated, I have a lot of experience or relationships with the food and beverage trade in the Caribbean, specifically with the imported distributors. That's the main group that I work with and work for, because most of the volume of products is coming through them. Most of what is imported and sold in the market first comes through them and then goes to the retailers, the hotels, etc. So basically what they're saying, one of the first things, and this is to bear in mind, especially when you meet with them at a trade show or you've just met them from one of the maybe inbound trade missions that SISTA put on, or on an actual outbound trade mission, and you go to meet a specific market, they always ask me to say, implore upon the suppliers that that if they could understand that initially their orders may be small, but there's, depending on how well the product does, there's potential that they can grow into big orders, and in some cases even container loads, because as I said before, a lot of the freight and a lot of the trade is usually less than container load business, but some cases, depending on how well the product does, in some cases, I know, for example, like the meats and those big categories that we looked at, dairy and stuff, typically those are container load quantities, once the business has been established, but, there are even opportunities for other products for them to grow into large, what we call large in the Caribbean, export opportunities. Certainly, the distributors are asking for reliable service and communications. Now, and I say back to them, that's exactly what the U.S. companies want from you. So, you know, everybody, once they provide that to each other, that should be fine. They want good value, competitive pricing, good quality, goes without saying. I always recommend for U.S. companies that are preparing to, you know, go to or whatever activity, trade show, whatever, if they can have just an, you know, some sort of quotations of their products, they, you know, they're always asking for pricing. So if you could give them like FOB Miami quotations, that would be great because especially, you know, in initial meeting, obviously, if you're getting down into negotiations and stuff, to provide more, but that is always a good guideline because that's the kind of thing that will help them have an idea. Yes, this is a product could definitely sell in our market. They, you know, they may ask you about credit terms because, like I indicated before, sometimes the importers in the Caribbean, the buyers, they need credit because of the slow payment that's happening on their customers' end. So that is something they may ask you about. Certainly, and this is especially for exporters of perishable products, they ask you for adequate lead times with products with expiry dates because, you know, if they say it makes no sense being shipped a product with a week or two of expiry date because by the time they get the product clear, the product gets out of their warehouse and goes to their customers' shop or wherever it's being sold, you know, there's no way, especially in the retail industry, you can have a product on the market and, you know, it's just got there and it only has a couple of days left before it expires. So, you know, that is something that's a big issue. And they said, you know, what has happened historically is that sometimes companies, you know, almost, you know, sort of dump almost expired products on the Caribbean. It makes no sense because, you know, they can't be sold. It's a loss situation. Now, the next point that they always raise, and I've kind of inferred it earlier, is that they do want exclusivity when it comes to the relationship that they have with you as an exporter to their market. And I like to, I'm tired of saying this. You probably have heard me say, if you've heard me before, you probably heard me say exclusivity is not a bad word in the Caribbean because by virtue of the size of our markets, it actually, exclusivity, if you have that right partner, can work very well for you and for your trading partner in the specific market. And that's usually a requirement of our markets because, you know, if you don't have exclusivity, typically, you know, and I'm speaking in a very general way. Obviously, there may be one or two specific instances, but generally speaking, you're just cannibalizing your own business. I would say, for example, the Dominican Republic, that is a big enough market where you may find that you have an exclusive distributor, but there's an understanding that the largest retail chain that they have there in the DR may want to do direct business with you. And in a lot of cases, they will use that because that group is so big that they can, you know, demand that, you know, we won't do business unless you sell to us directly. I've understood. But generally speaking in the Caribbean, you know, there are exceptions that they do ask for exclusivity. And finally, and, you know, as was spoken about before, there's an opportunity for you to get marketing support to sell in the Caribbean. They are marketing support. What you find, especially the smaller companies, usually there's limited resources to help promote your product and do, you know, any sort of advertising, et cetera, in the export market. And any help they can get as a distributor, importer, representing you in their market, they would appreciate that. So certainly utilize what Daniel was talking about earlier in terms of getting market promotion assistance. Now, having looked at what they're looking for, I always say to companies, you also need to, you know, obviously not the first meeting that you have with potential importer distributors in the Caribbean, but certainly when you're getting down to discussing business and potential of doing, you know, becoming partners and working for each other in the market, there are certain things that I think you need to know, and I just like to highlight it. It may be so obvious that, you know, why is she saying this, but, you know, no harm in telling you again. So obviously, you know, you need to know some general information about the company, you know, the location. It's all there. I mean, it's kind of obvious what they're asking for, the type of products that they're selling. Good to know their major product lines, you know, what percentage of the sales these lines represent. Key thing is you have to look out for product and brand, beg your pardon, conflicts with your product line. Now, one thing I would say to you, you'll find, again, because of the nature of our markets, and it's pretty concentrated, especially the bigger companies, you will find that you probably will have brand conflicts because they're already carrying major U.S. and international brands. Some instances, companies have several companies in a group, and one company will deal with the big customers, or the big brands, and then another company will carry, and they will make sure that the second company, there is no, treats your line as a smaller supplier, etc., just as well as the other division or company that they have that's handling the big brand names. So, that may not be an issue in that case, but you just need to understand if you're dealing with a company and they're already carrying a similar product to yours, how will you ensure that if they carry your line, it won't be second, play second fiddle to their major lines that they're already carrying. That's a very important issue that you want to explore. Certainly for reference purposes and that type of thing, you can ask them, to get an idea of their credibility. Well, credibility, yes, and their experience, etc. Who are the current foreign companies that they're representing, particularly from the United States in their market? Maybe they could ask them for a reference or two. Similarly, blank references, other trade references. Marketing information. You want to know what kind of trade shows you typically, locally meaning in their Caribbean market, or internationally what they go to, what type of activities they do, and who are their key accounts, which is very important. If it's a distributor that says they sell to all the major retailers, actually ask them, what's the name of those retailers? And then you can always verify that through another source, to make sure that, what they're saying, that this is indeed one of the major retailers in the market. Discuss with them what would be their recommended approach to launching your product. It might be just a very soft launch or whatever it is, but, discuss with them. These are the kind of things that you can use to sort of evaluate and, sort of validate the potential distributor partner that you are looking at getting into business to. And, this can be applied anywhere, because I know I've had companies that tell me from the United States that they've had inquiries. And this could be legitimate companies, I might add, inquiries online of companies, or maybe they met them at a trade show and they really know nothing about them. So this is a good way to sort of screen potential trading partner opportunities in the Caribbean. So I'm going to wrap up now, and basically my recommendation to all of you, again, thank you for joining me this afternoon, and Danielle, to talk about the Caribbean. Basically, in terms of next steps, what do I recommend? Certainly evaluate the Caribbean market opportunities for your products, and when I say that, unfortunately, I tell people, because I have to do, consulting work in the Caribbean, and I know for a fact that getting data is very challenging. We're not like those developed markets that have these online published market research reports and that type of thing. Sorry, it's just not a lot of data out there. However, we do have the advantage of being able to look at the USDA FAS export statistics. So that's a good source, and also you can look online at the USDA FAS market report, because as you know, in the Caribbean, the USDA, their Foreign Agricultural Service offices, they have two in the Caribbean, one based in Miami, which covers most of the Caribbean, and the other one based in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, which covers Jamaica, Haiti, and the DR. And in fact, the DR office has two representatives, one based in Kingston, Jamaica, and one based in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. So they have people on the ground, and from time to time, they do reports. So it's good to go online and go to the USDA website and browse the FAS, the Foreign Agricultural Service website, to see what reports they may have from their offices on the ground in the Caribbean. So that's a good source. And of course, the export statistics also from them. And once you've done that, you also need to probably look a little more into the statistics and see where would be the best Caribbean market prospects for your company, for your type of products. And based on that, once you've done that research and that evaluation, have a look at some of the programs and activities that are available for you to target Caribbean food and beverage buyers, and welcome you to participate in these activities. And I would be remiss as a good Caribbean native if I didn't say to you, after all of that hard work, just come down to the Caribbean, just chill in the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pamela. That was wonderful and very informative. As we mentioned, we have an inbound trade mission coming up June 13th and 14th. It's going to take place in Miami, and we will have buyers from various Caribbean countries as well as Latin America meeting one-on-one with folks who sign up for this trade mission. So I'll follow up with an email with the recording to today's webinar as well as the presentations, and in that email I'll include a link to this trade mission. And if you're interested, just let us know and we'll get you signed up. One exciting thing about this year's inbound trade mission is we have buyers. We do this trade mission every year, and we have buyers this year from Peru coming. I believe there will be 3 Peruvian buyers, so that is a new market for us, new exposure for our countries, for our companies. So again, if you're interested, we'd love to get you signed up for that trade mission. Pamela, did you have anything else to add about the trade mission?
Well, okay, just specifically since we're talking about the Caribbean, there will be 7 buyers from 7 different Caribbean markets, including the Dominican Republic, like I said, which is a major market, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago, which are 3 major markets, among other markets with good opportunities, including Aruba, Barbados, and so I really would encourage those of you who are interested in coming, not to mention the buyers from Central America, Colombia, and Peru. So it's quite a range. In fact, it's a great regional opportunity. So that's it. That's my plug.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And I did notice that a few questions came in through the chat box, so I'll go ahead and read the first one. How do we find a partner that carries our product with proper temperature controls? And how can we know that our product is kept in good condition through the remainder of the transportation until it gets to the consumer?
Yes, what I would say is, by and large, that is certainly not an issue, because as I said before, you can find the right partner. How you find them is, like I said, when you're, as I said on the previous couple of screens ago, evaluating the type of products that they handle, and you evaluate their company capabilities. What kind of warehousing do they have? Why I say it's not a big issue, because we're already, as I said, in the Caribbean, we're bringing in virtually most food and beverage type of products to our markets, and we consume basically everything that you consume up here, we're consuming it down here. Now, what you have to make sure is that the company you're doing business with is handling similar products. If it's frozen meat, if it's ice cream, which is kind of delicate, and that's an example of a product that they are very specific imported distributors that only handle ice cream, because that is one that requires a lot of care. Whether it's dairy, whether it's chilled, so like I said, there are proven, it's already proven, because these products are coming to the market and, effectively reaching the market, but make sure you just identify the right company. And basically looking at their facilities and what they're handling currently is a good way to start. And similarly, the chain follows right up to the logistics, right up to the point of shipment, which I said typically comes out of Miami or South Florida, and who they're dealing with to handle their shipments from that end is also important. So trust me, it is being done, and it can be done. You just have to make sure, ask the right questions and find the right partners.
Yep, that makes sense. The next question, how can we find out if a similar product to ours is already being sold in the Caribbean market, and how can you find out what the price range they're paying for that similar product is?
Well, Daniel, have you recommended go on a trade mission? Well, well, it can be done. It's not hard. You probably would have to visit, short of having a contact in the market who you can ask to go out in the trade and do the research. You can also ask the companies, but if you're planning to do business with them, you probably would want an independent source to tell you, yes, this brand is there already, and these are the prices, these are the retail prices. Basically, you probably would have to go out into trade or participate in some of our activities, in terms of going in the market through an inbound mission or something like that. So unfortunately, like I said, in the Caribbean, there isn't a lot of data or online information available that you may find in some of the developed markets that that are out there. So unfortunately, a lot of it has to be, on the ground research. Sure. Basically, yeah. So
that makes sense. What is the common shelf life for the Caribbean markets?
Oh, I can't answer you specifically because it all depends on the product. But what I would say, definitely giving a supplier a 2 weeks shelf life or 2 week expiry date time frame is not viable. So, but I mean, it all depends, and who is better to tell you than what type of product you have, and also the potential buyer that you're speaking with. But be aware that even though we're just down the road, as I said earlier, just consider that you're shipping a product to a market, they clear it through customs, and once they get into their warehouse, they may have to then resell it to the retailer. And, just consider all that time that could take. It may be easier to do it for the Caribbean. It may be a shorter lead time for the Caribbean versus other markets, but still, they're asking you for a lead time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, probably a shorter amount of time than, let's say, Asia, but still there needs to be enough shelf life. Yep.
Yeah. They don't want to be dumped on, put it that way. That's the message. They don't want to be dumped on,
so he came back and said, sorry about the confusion. I'm asking the shelf life of granola bars and breakfast cereals. So I guess shelf stable.
Yeah. I would, I mean, okay, I'll be honest with you, that's very specific, but I would certainly think, I mean, I would say at least 6 months.
6 months. Yes, so about 6 months. That makes sense. I've heard similar. I've heard similar from other folks. Any other questions? This is my email address, danielle@cesta.org, but I think you've all received emails from me. So please feel free to email me with any questions that come up after today's webinar, and as I mentioned, I will be in touch with all of you with follow-up from today, and let us know, if you guys are interested in the market and have more questions, we're here to help. So thank you so much, Pamela. That was extremely informative and educational, and we are looking forward to seeing you in June in Miami.
Thank you very much, and I hope to see some of you too. Thank you all for attending.
Yes, all right. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.